to become a U.S. citizen. So the first thing that you have to think about, of course, is if you want to become a U.S. citizen, you have to first get your green card. Green card means that you have permanent residency in this country, and without having the green card and permanent residency, you will not be eligible for citizenship. So it's not like you can come here on a visa and after some time just apply for citizenship. That's not how it works. You have to get that green card first. And then once you get that green card, congratulations. This is really wonderful news, because what does that mean? It means you're now eligible for citizenship. So what's the next thing after getting the green card that you have to think about to become eligible and prepared to be a citizen? Well, the next thing is that you have to reside and be present in the United States for 5 years if you are not married to a U.S. citizen, or for 3 years if you are married to a U.S. citizen. So the great thing is that if your spouse is a U.S. citizen, after 3 years of having that green card, you can actually apply for citizenship. And in fact, you can submit that application within the 90 days before you reach the 3 years. However, if you're not married to a U.S. citizen, you have to wait the 5 years. So 5 years from the date that you got your green card before you can apply for citizenship. And again, you have that 3 months before you reach the 5 years in which you can start preparing your application and submit it. So it's really important that you meet that physical presence requirement. Additionally, there's another requirement, which is that you have to be continuously present in the United States. What does that mean? It means that for half of that time, whether it's that 3 years or the 5 years, and especially when it comes to the 5 years, you have to have been residing in the United States, so like about 30 months or so. This means that if you have been traveling a lot, let's say every year you go away for several months, you may not be eligible to apply for citizenship because you don't have enough months in which you've lived in the United States. Let's say you have been living in the United States and then you take a trip 1 year for 8 months, and then the next year you take another trip for another 7 months or something, and you do this for 3 years in a row. It's possible you don't have enough months in the United States. So how does that work? What that means is that you then have to wait until you have about that 5 years in which half of that time you're in the United States. So if you're somebody who travels a lot, I highly recommend that you think about how often you're traveling, because you want to keep that green card. You want to be eligible for citizenship. Additionally, if you are going to travel for, let's say, more than a year, leave with permission. Get permission to leave. Some people even need to leave for longer, so get permission. Because if you do leave with permission, then there are special considerations that come into play when you apply for citizenship, and they're calculating your physical presence and continuous presence in the United States. Other than that, if you're going on trips for a week, a few months here and there, you should be fine. But it's really, really important that both for citizenship and to maintain your green card, that you do not leave the United States too often, and especially not for longer than a year if you want to keep that green card and if you want to apply for citizenship. If you do travel quite a bit, etc., whatnot, and you are not meeting the requirement, just wait 5 years, make sure you meet that requirement, or the 3 years if you're married to a U.S. citizen, and then apply. So what's the next thing? The next thing is good moral character. What does good moral character refer to? This is something that we use all the time within immigration law. And sometimes it could just be as simple as being a good person, right? But in terms of the legal world, what it means is that having a criminal history can have an impact on your citizenship application. If you have committed felonies, they could potentially, depending on the criminal history, bar you from getting citizenship. If you've engaged in prostitution, that is a conditional bar. You may not be able to apply until a certain amount of time has passed, or, certain things have been done to deal with that. Additionally, if you do have a criminal history, it means that you have to demonstrate that you have somehow rehabilitated yourself. So you have done other things that show that you're a good person, like, let's say, doing volunteer work, paying your taxes, etc. All of these things can factor into good moral character. So having a criminal history doesn't mean that you can't ever apply for citizenship. It depends specifically on what exactly your criminal history is. Some crimes will prevent you from getting citizenship, and then there are other crimes where if a certain amount of time has passed, and if you demonstrate with other factors like affidavits, community service, paying taxes, working, etc., you will be able to overcome that criminal history and you can still apply. What does USCIS look at? USCIS looks at what has happened within the last 5 years, or if you're married to a U.S. citizen, within the last 3 years. Does this mean that they don't look at all at what happened 10 years ago? They're not supposed to consider what happened 10 years ago. They generally focus on the 5-year period. However, in their discretion, they can think about these past criminal activities or history that you have. So the recommendation is, if you do have a criminal history and a certain number of years pass by, please try not to get involved with something else and add to this criminal history. You can overcome it, but it's better if you don't have that. This doesn't mean that if you do end up engaging in something and get arrested that you won't be able to overcome it. You will. So dealing with criminal history is a very specific thing, and I'll do another session about this at another time, but this is just something for you to be aware of. Additionally, you need to pay your taxes. Paying your taxes is part of good moral character. Why is that important? It's important because it shows that you have intent to become a U.S. citizen, you want to contribute to this country, you're paying your dues. And in fact, one of the requirements for citizenship is submitting your tax returns and showing that you have been paying your taxes. So if you owe any back taxes, please go ahead and pay those taxes. And by the time you apply for citizenship, make sure that you have covered all of your any taxes that you owe. Make sure you've paid them and all your tax returns are up to date, because you will need to bring them with you to the interview. Additionally, if you have been divorced and you pay child support, make sure you're paying your child support payments, because that can factor into good moral character as well. So the final thing I want to say about this is, even if you do have a criminal history, you're not paying your taxes, it doesn't mean you can't address these things. You can. It just depends on the background. I have had cases with people where they had criminal history, we dealt with it, and then unfortunately, while we were in the process of the citizenship application, they got arrested again. So it was very, very recent. In fact, I had somebody a few months before their citizenship interview, they were arrested and they already had a criminal history of a few other things. So we ended up addressing this new incident that took place by showing other factors for how they were still a good person, and that arguing that this incident shouldn't prevent them from getting citizenship, and we were still able to get it. So I'm seeing some questions over here coming in. I will address them as I get to that topic or later on. So just bear with me. All right. So perfect. And finally, regarding this topic, if you have a criminal history, please don't apply for citizenship on your own without at least consulting an immigration attorney so they can let you know how it affects your eligibility. So the next thing is, and this is the most important, practicing your English. So I recently went to a citizenship interview, and I was waiting for almost 3 or 4 hours to get called with my client. And as I was waiting there, I was observing other people who were there at the office. And there was one person, and when she signed in, she didn't understand what the person at the window was telling her. And they were just asking her about COVID and if she had traveled, but she didn't understand that. And they had to get an interpreter to explain that to her. So as I was observing her, and this is a young woman, not elderly, etc., why not? it occurred to me that she may have difficulty in her citizenship exam because she couldn't understand just this initial part of this person at the window clerk asking her, her name, if she had any COVID symptoms, if she had traveled. And the reason I bring this up is because, later I saw her after her interview and she told me she hadn't passed. And I wasn't too surprised, because people don't realize passing your citizenship interview is not just about studying the questions. You have to understand English. So when you go in, they are testing your English, not just your ability to understand the questions they're asking you, but if you can communicate with them. Right now, when you go in, the officers ask you follow-up questions about the things that were in your citizenship application. So you have to be able to understand what the officer is saying in order to communicate with them. Sometimes it's as simple as asking you how you're doing, if you're working, where you work, etc. And some people are not able to answer these questions. And what the officer is basically doing is they're seeing if you really do understand English. So what's the best way to prepare for that? One, don't wait until 2 months before your citizenship interview to start learning English or taking English classes. If you have your green card, I recommend as soon as possible to take some English language classes. Try learning English with, practicing English with a friend, a loved one. One of the best ways to learn other language is by watching movies or listening to music in that language. Practice it when you go outside, to the store. Just ask general questions, because you need to adjust to understanding common things that people are asking you. Sometimes it's also understanding the accent or how somebody's pronouncing something, becoming familiar with answering a person as well. So practicing English is very, very important. Hiring an attorney to go with you to your citizenship interview is not going to make up for your lack of understanding of English. So I went to another interview and the person did not understand English at all. Me, as the attorney, I can't address that question. You have to understand general English, like simple things as, I don't want to say simple, but in fact it comes down to it. General things like talking about what you do for your employment, if you file taxes, why you want to become a U.S. citizen. Sometimes they ask you to define certain words that come up, So that's very, very important. So I highly recommend, please start practicing English so that when it does come time for your citizenship interview, you will pass that test. Because the hardest part are not the questions, it's understanding the English for a lot of people. So having said that, let's go next to the fifth thing, which is studying United States history. And I see all these questions. I will address your questions once I get through this. You have to learn U.S. history. So what is U.S. history? It's understanding, the American Revolutionary War, the Civil War. Civics test also covers different things like the Constitution. What are the different branches, the 3 branches of the U.S. government? Who is the President of the United States? You have to learn all of these things. So there are 100 questions, and you can get a study guide. It's available online on the USCIS website, and there are even some study apps on your phone that you can access. And you have to learn all of these questions, and they will ask you those questions, and they'll give you a variety of different answers that could be the right answer to that. So the great thing is, on the actual exam, you just need to get 6 correct, which is really, really nice, and they will ask you up to 10 questions. So if you study and you learn all of this, you will be great. So a lot of people, just learning these 100 questions is sufficient for them. But for some other people, they need more. So what can you do? You can take U.S. history classes. You can watch some movies, some documentaries. That's a great way to learn because it gets the details into your memory. You start being able to understand the difference between one war, the other, the different branches of the government, understanding how the government functions. All of that is important because you are trying to become a citizen of this country, right? So if you're going to become a citizen of this country, you need to know its history, and you need to understand how the government works, because at some point you're going to want to vote. You might want to participate in politics. So all of these things are really, really important. That said, let's talk about some exceptions. There are some exceptions to the English requirement and the civics requirement. So if you are somebody who is 50 and has had the green card for 15 years at the time you apply for citizenship, or you are, 50 and you have had the green card for 20 years, or if you're 55 and you've had the green card for 15 years, you can take the test in your native language. So usually this is people who are a lot older and have had the green card for a really long time, but you still have to take the civics test. The nice thing is that there will be a set of 10 questions in which you can study from, so that's really, really nice. So you still have to learn all the questions, and then there will be 10 questions you'll be asked, and you have to get 6 right. However, if you're 65 and older, you will be given special consideration at the time that you apply. And this is when you've been residing here for a significantly long time, right? For like at least 20 years, and having that green card for 20 years, there will be a special consideration for the civics exam, in which there are a set of 10 questions and you can study from those. So that's great to know. So let me go back and let me see some of the questions that people have asked. What if I fail the test, civics or English, can I apply again? If you fail the test, you will be given another interview, another opportunity. So I highly recommend studying again and then going to the interview, this time well prepared. So if you know the interview didn't go well and you didn't pass, then please start studying as soon as possible. You'll have another chance. If you don't pass that, then your application will be denied, and you can, of course, apply again, but I highly recommend that you study English and learn the civics, study for the civics part before you apply again, just to make sure that you don't have the same result. How hard are the N400 questions? So the citizenship questions, it depends, right? For some people, the questions can be easy. For some people, the questions can be difficult. Sometimes the questions are, they ask, who is the President of the United States? On what date is Independence Day? Or who is Abraham Lincoln? Or it'll be something like, name a river in the United States, or why did we fight in the Civil War? These are some of the kind of questions that come up. If you study for the exam, they should not be difficult questions. These should actually, you should be able to answer them without any hesitation, and a lot of people are able to answer them. Sometimes what I hear people tell me is that, they study so much for this exam, and they're like, well, they only asked me 6 questions. They kind of want to be asked more questions. So they're not that difficult if you study. However, if you don't study and if you don't learn English, then of course it's going to be difficult, right? So if you go ahead and, study for English, study English and study for the exam, so that you make it a much easier experience for yourself. We have somebody asking a question about an F2 visa. We're not addressing that here. That's related to in another category. You can address that to us, and we will answer it separately. So let's just see if there's anything else. So the other thing that I want to mention is that sometimes people ask, is there a medical exemption? There is actually a medical exemption to applying when you apply for citizenship for the English test and the civics test. And yes, so actually someone just asked me right now, are there any exemptions to the test? Yes, so I'm talking about the medical exemption. So for the medical exemption, you have to show that you have some sort of mental impairment or disability or condition that prevents you from learning, and that makes it difficult for you to take the exam in English and to study. So it can't be something, some sort of medical condition that you have that is just difficult. It has to be something that has an impact on your actual ability to learn. And a lot of people apply for this medical exemption with conditions that don't qualify to meet the exemption. So it's actually kind of a high bar. So they do look to see what the physician has written and what is provided with this form to see if the condition that you have or impairment that you have actually does prevent you from memorizing, from learning, etc. Otherwise, it won't be strong enough. And I mentioned earlier, for those of you who missed it, and I always end up confusing this, but generally, if you're 50 years and older, 50 years of age and 20 years, you don't have to take it in English. You can take it in your native language. And 55 years old and 15 years, you have the green card. You can also take it in English. And then additionally, if you're 65 and you meet this 15 years or 20 years of having the green card, you can learn the civics from a set of 10 questions, and you're giving special consideration for that. So are there any other questions about anything I have addressed or regarding preparing for citizenship? All right, so I hope this was helpful for you. Some of those things that I've mentioned might seem quite obvious, but really, if you follow these things, first, become a green card holder. Second, make sure you meet the physical presence and continuous presence requirement. Third, uphold good moral character. Fourth, practice your English. And fifth, study for the civics test. If you do all of these things, then you're certainly on your way to become a U.S. citizen. And there are a lot of benefits to becoming a U.S. citizen. I mean, first, if you like to travel, you don't have to worry about traveling. You can come and go and not worry about losing your green card. Second, you can petition for your parents and your siblings. Third, you can vote. Fourth, you can participate in a jury. So there are a number of special things and benefits to becoming a U.S. citizen. So the question is, a woman who's almost 70, married to a U.S. citizen, can she be exempt from the civics test, married but no green card? No. The first thing is you have to have a green card. So if you don't have a green card, you cannot apply for citizenship. Then, even if you're 70, you have to have had the green card for at least the 15 years at minimum in order to be eligible for these exemptions. All right. Are there any other questions? If you have other questions, we have a lot of information available on our website, and you can also send us your questions and we will try to address them in future discussions. I hope this was informative for you, and if you have gotten your green card, congratulations. Please follow these steps and start preparing to become a U.S. citizen. All right, take care and have a good night.